This is
the train conductor.
This is the train conductor.
All right.
Hello, Jordan.
What's up?
Hey, Jordan.
How's it going?
Good.
Right.
Listen.
Hey, let's keep in mind this guy knows Rusty, so it might.
You do know Rusty, right? That's why we're calling you, is because Rusty. Here's our situation that we wanted to know about. We've got our warehouse is over here by the train tracks, and the train tracks are probably 100. They may not even be 100 yards.
Like 50 yards.
They're 50 yards from the building, and there's a train parked over there. And the damn thing has been there probably 5 days, 6 days. Out of commission, and there's guys working on it and all this other shit. And I'm assuming that there are at least 2 tracks right there, or they couldn't have taken up the space. So, that having been said, what we wanted to know is, what's an engineer do on the train?
So, on a train, there's basically you have a 2-man crew on every train.
There's only 2 men on a train?
That's it.
Wow.
2 guys.
You mean you got one of these half-mile long or 3/4 mile long coal trains that run up and down the tracks between Wyoming and Glen Rose, Texas. And there's 2 guys on that thing.
Yep.
And
That's
one's
right.
in the front, one's in the back, because I've noticed that there's.
No, well, it used to be like that. It used to be back when you had a caboose, there was a 3rd guy on the rear.
Right.
But now they got rid of the caboose, and
It's a push-pull deal
2 guys
now,
up
right?
front. Yeah. Now they basically took away one job and replaced it took away the caboose, replaced it with the device that does everything the switchman or the brakeman did back there.
All right. So there's the engineer and a brakeman. That's the crew, right?
Conductor.
Conductor. For people.
Yeah.
So the engineer is the one physically driving the train, forwards and backwards, all that, stopping. Right. The conductor's job is basically everything else. He is talking to the dispatcher, doing work en route, setting out cars, switching, picking up cars.
Doing all the
everything
logistical shit that's involved in the train that's not actually involved in actually making the train go down the tracks.
Right. So, looking at signals, any kind of work that involves cutting up the train, putting it back together, all that's all conductor. Engineer's pretty much just driving.
Which one's the higher skill job?
Definitely engineer.
Okay.
But, all engineers were conductors, but you go to class to become an engineer.
Got it.
So you got to be real familiar with all of the mechanics and workings of the train before you can be an engineer.
Yeah, you've got there's a console with all kinds of bells and whistles and gauges, and they send you up to a school in Kansas City to learn all that.
Well, that's what we'd guessed. We'd guessed that your primary job is monitoring equipment when you're an engineer.
Yeah.
And
right.
making sure that the head pressure doesn't blow the goddamn whole entire engine up and all that stuff.
What's a normal shift, and how much downtime is there, if any?
Well, so like I work out of Wichita Falls, and we have 2 runs basically that we make out of Wichita Falls. You can either go to Amarillo or Fort Worth. Now, going to Fort Worth, there's some days you can get on a train and you step on a train like the coal loads. Those are going down south. So we basically, once you get to Fort Worth, you swap out another crew. But there's been times I get on a coal load and I don't stop, and you can make it there 3.5, 4 hours.
To Fort Worth from Wichita Falls. So you're going 55
without stopping. It depends. Like the fastest you can go on these tracks is probably track speed 60 miles an hour.
60.
But depending on what you're hauling, everything else has speed restrictions on it. But, you know, there's other trains coming at you, and sometimes it takes 12 hours to get there.
Damn.
Oh, God. You got to kind of not hit them.
Yeah, it's kind of. Yeah, well, you know, there's times you pull over in a siding and wait 4 hours to let a train come around you, so you can go again.
That's interesting.
It's just there's no typical day.
So what you're saying is there's a lot of downtime sometimes.
Yeah. Then you get to a hotel, and you might be there for 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you get on a train and come back.
Well, now that's interesting.
So you never really know.
If you're going to Amarillo, is it a lot different than the trip to Fort Worth in terms of technical aspects of the stuff?
Well, it's the same thing. It's just a longer trip. It takes a little longer to get there.
Right.
And it's a little bit colder.
Well, it depends on what month it is, you know.
Right. Like this time of year, I don't want nothing to do with Amarillo. They can have that. It was like 20-something there the other day.
Yeah, it's already cold in Amarillo.
So the cabin or whatever is not temperature controlled?
No, it is. It's we got heaters and air conditioners, but you know, in the summer, most of those air conditioners don't really keep up, so you're pretty much dying up there.
It's
you
hot.
know, when it's 110,
whether the
112,
air's
it's
on
bad.
or not, right?
Yeah, it's not good.
And here's an interesting little thing that most people don't know about modern railroading, unless they've been paying attention, is the diesel engines on a locomotive. I guess is it called the locomotive still?
Mm-hmm.
The diesel engines on a locomotive don't run the wheels. The diesel engines on a locomotive run electric generators, which run electric motors, which run the wheels. So it's like a 3-stage process, and and that's because of the physics of electric motors versus the mechanical power.
And then the brakes and everything, that's all ran from air.
Right.
Everything else is air.
The brakes are all pneumatic, right?
Right.
That's interesting.
Hey, Jordy, do you start in a position? Can you start as a conductor, or is that something you work up to?
No, you start as a conductor. When they hire, it's your title's like conductor trainee or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
How often do you hate the guy you're riding with?
Well,
Usually
fortunately, most of the guys I work with, in Wichita, we're all, you know, it's a smaller town, smaller depot, so we all know each other. But you know, if you work that Amarillo run, a lot of times you're working with an Amarillo guy. So I've never had experience where I hated someone or didn't. But there's times where, like, you know, you've been up all day waiting to go to work, and then here it is midnight, you're getting on a train, you know, your eyes are barely open, and you're working with a guy, you don't know if he'll talk to you or not. You know, it makes for a long trip. You never met him before.
I bet it
you
does.
know? Sometimes it can be pretty brutal.
So the sleep schedule is completely dependent on the circumstances that you encounter on the trip, right?
Well, as far as, so it's all, your rest cycle and everything, it's all FRA regulated. They have crazy rules. I mean, everything is
just like the trucking.
Everything that deals with the railroad, there's a rule for it.
Just like the trucking industry.
So you have 12 hours off, and they can call you again. But that's the thing. You never know when they're going to call anything. You could get called right on your rest, or you can get called 30 hours later. You know, you just never know.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. All right. Engineers and conductors, and there's only 2 people on that mile-long coal train. What do you call that, a coal load? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, loaded coal train. We just call it a coal load, yeah.
Well, that is...
this was fascinating.
I mean, we see those things up and down the highway all over the southern United States. They're a terribly important part of the economy. And
right.
Now
I had to ask
somebody.
I had to ask somebody a while back, how do they unload a coal train? And
I have no idea.
I can tell you this.
Okay.
At the terminal destination of the coal train, they take the they take the cars apart, and each one of the cars is unloaded separately by rotating the whole car in a circle and dumping it into a pit. And then they rotate it back to vertical, hook it back up, and do the next car.
That's cool.
I'd love to see that done. Wow. Can you imagine how cool that would be to see an entire coal train car dumped?
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
That's just crazy as hell, isn't it?
What's really sketchy is that, so keep in mind, just a conductor and engineer. So there's certain times where something will happen and you have to, we call it shoving. So it's basically making a reverse move. So you got a mile-long train in the middle of the night, and the conductor walks back there with his lantern. It's just a glorified flashlight. And he gets on the rear car, and he is the eyes of the engineer a mile up there. And we're telling him what we can see and when to stop. He's just going off our radio signals, basically.
So he walks down the side of the train on the ground.
Yeah, sometimes.
To the engine at the other end of the train.
Yeah, and a lot of times there's not even an engine back there. You're just hanging on to the side of a car.
Wow. That's cool. So he gets back there and he's just out there just in the wind, right?
Yeah, so basically, like, I would say to my engineer, all right, we're all lined up, basically tell them there's nothing that I can see in our way, between us and as far as I can see. And I'll tell them it's car counts, basically, how many car lengths. So I'll say, good for 40 cars. And he'll start backing up. And as I can see a little more, I'll give him a little more car counts and all that. But, when it's in the middle of the night, you can't hardly see nothing back there. Because, man, please go slow. Go a little slow, dude.
Yeah, and I guess
so that's where it really...
It takes a while to slow down a train.
Yes. That's why you better be paying attention if you're a conductor back there.
Well, that's fascinating. We ought to do a whole show on the railroad industry one of these days.
Right, we can get Jordy on.
Well, get Jordy.
He's in Wichita Falls, apparently.
Hell, he'd just walk over one day. Do this.
Jump off the train.
Jump off the train out here. Come in the studio. Well, Jordy, I appreciate your time, man. Thanks for calling us.
All right. Okay. Y'all come back at me anytime you want to know anything about trains.
I'll do it. All right?
All right. Thanks, Jordy.
All right. Y'all take it easy.
Okay.
Yep.
I've always been fascinated by trains.
Oh, everybody is. I was just thinking, if we ever have him come in and do a show with us, we need to get an 8-year-old in here to ask questions too, because the 8-year-old will have questions.
We'll have the real
questions that we forgot about.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are all the type of cars? There's all kinds of different cars. There's flatbeds that they carry 52-foot truck trailers on. You've seen those things.
Yep.
There's cattle cars. There's grain bins. There's tankers. Because, a railroad, a train loaded with oil tanks makes so much more sense than a pipeline. Oh, God almighty. So, we got all kind of things we could talk about with a railroad guy. Let's keep that in mind.
Let's do it. Yeah. Sounds great.
We'll see what the response is to this.
Well, one guy just said this podcast sucks.
Yeah.
Fuck them. We don't do the podcast for you.
We don't do it for them anyways.
We do the podcast for us.
That's right.
You have to keep that in mind because if I don't enjoy doing it, I'm not coming in. All right?
Oh, shit.
All right. Should we take another call?
Take another call. Okay. This week's Starting Strength Radio is one of your favorite things to see, as well as mine, too. It's a call-in Q&A. We're having a call-in Q&A, and that's where you guys call us on a number we tell you about in advance. You call in, you line up, and we take your calls, and we just have all kinds of fun. This week we talked to a guy about the railroad, how railroad industry works, that kind of stuff. What else did we talk about?
Snakes.
Talk about rattlesnakes. We didn't talk about. Did we talk about food at all?
No.
Inadvertently.
Somebody called about. Did somebody say something about cooking?
Somebody said something about.
He's asking about. No, he made a stupid joke.
Oh yeah.
That was. Yeah. That won't even be in the show.
No.
All right. So anyway, you guys join us this week for the next episode of the Call-In Q&A on Starting Strength Radio.